IELTS Listening. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer giving a lecture about the history of chocolate. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now we shall begin. You should answer the question as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer the questions.
Good morning, everyone. Let's dive into one of the most fascinating and delicious subjects in history, the journey of chocolate. Now, I know many of you think of it as just a snack, a bar from the store, or a warm cup on a cold day. But its past is much richer and more meaningful than most realize. Let's begin with its botanical roots. The chocolate we enjoy today comes from the cacao tree, a tropical evergreen native to Central and South America. These trees are incredibly sensitive. They require not only warmth, but a constant supply of atmospheric moisture. You won't find them growing successfully in dry or temperate regions. In fact, cacao thrives only in places where the climate is humid, which allows the pods to grow and ripen properly. This is one reason the plant is so tied to equatorial countries. Now, the first known consumers of cacao were ancient Mesoamerican civilizations. The Maya, for example, were already cultivating and valuing cacao more than 2,000 years ago. But cacao wasn't just a food source, it had real economic significance. The beans themselves were rare and hard to cultivate, which made them valuable. In fact, they were used as currency. Imagine going to a market and paying for meat or cloth with beans instead of coins. Spanish explorers documented this practice when they arrived, amazed that cacao held monetary value in these societies. But don't get confused and think this cacao was anything like the chocolate bar you might eat today. The ancient method of preparation was quite different. Cacao was often ground into a paste and mixed with hot water and spices. And one thing they didn't use at all was sugar. That's right, their drink was thick, bitter, and often spicy, containing ingredients like chili peppers or vanilla. To us, it might not taste pleasant, but back then, the flavor was part of its cultural power. Now, let's talk about how cacao was more than just a drink. It was also considered a source of physical vitality. It wasn't just consumed for pleasure, but for energy. Warriors preparing for battle would drink cacao to build stamina and strength. It was believed to invigorate the body and mind. So while it might not have had caffeine like coffee, it held a similar role as a pre-battle or pre-hunt stimulant. The Aztecs, who came after the Maya, elevated cacao even further. For them, it was sacred. They associated cacao with divine forces, particularly with Tlaloc, their rain god. This makes sense when you think about it. Rain was essential for the growth of cacao trees, and thus cacao was closely tied to fertility and blessings. Offerings were made during rituals to ensure good harvests and rainfall. That reverence contributed to cacao's importance in Aztec ceremonies. When European explorers like Hernán Cortés arrived in the Americas, they took a keen interest in cacao. But when it was brought back to Europe, it was initially seen as a curiosity. Over time, however, the taste was adjusted to European preferences. Sugar and milk were added, and chocolate soon became the latest trend among the upper classes. At this early stage, it wasn't mass-produced. It was served as a luxury drink, reserved for elites in European courts and salons.
Now have a look at questions 37 to 40 in 30 seconds.
This exclusivity changed during the Industrial Revolution. Innovations in machinery and production allowed chocolate to be manufactured on a large scale. It was during this time that the familiar bar of chocolate was born. The first solid chocolate bars emerged in the 19th century, revolutionizing how chocolate was consumed. This was no longer a food for the few, but a treat for the many. To make chocolate more appealing to a broader audience, producers began modifying the recipe. One crucial addition was milk, which softened the bitterness of cacao and gave it a smoother texture. The resulting product was sweeter, lighter in color, and widely loved. This innovation is often credited to Swiss chocolate makers who remain famous for their creamy varieties even today. Let's take a step back now and look at chocolate from an economic perspective. As demand soared worldwide, chocolate became more than a treat. It became a commodity. The industry is now valued in the billions. In financial terms, we're talking massive numbers. The chocolate trade is worth billions of dollars annually. This includes not just retail sales, but everything from manufacturing equipment to branding and advertising. But as with many global commodities, there's a darker side. The vast majority of cacao is grown in developing countries, particularly in West Africa and Latin America. The labor involved in harvesting cacao pods is intense, and unfortunately, many farmers receive unfair compensation for their efforts. In fact, they're often paid too little, barely enough to sustain their families. This is especially concerning when you consider how profitable the chocolate industry is for global corporations. In response to this, the fair trade movement emerged, an initiative to protect farmers, ensure fair wages, and prohibit exploitative labor practices. When you buy chocolate with a fair trade label, you're supporting more ethical sourcing. It's a small step consumers can take to make a global impact. To sum up, chocolate's story spans millennia, from sacred rituals in ancient temples to supermarket shelves in every corner of the globe. Its journey reveals much about trade, culture, colonization, and capitalism. It started as a bitter, sacred drink, transformed into a refined European luxury, and now exists in countless forms: bars, drinks, spreads, available to nearly every person on Earth. But even as we enjoy it, we must remember where it comes from. A delicate tree in a hot, humid forest, a history of currency and conquest, and the labor of farmers who still seek fairness. Chocolate is sweet, but its story is deep. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all for today.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Please make sure you have transferred all your answers to the answer sheet correctly. The listening test is now over. You may now proceed to the reading section.